Do we really need game reviews? Let's find out. Hey everyone, before we get started, I just wanted to address some of the comments you all have left about the tone of the show, like this one, and also this one. Okay, so you're totally right. Lately, I've been a little bit too loud, but I just get so excited about games. But it's also because this is my first time doing any real on-camera work, and the show is a bit of a work in progress. So that's why it's really important that you all leave me comments so that we can make things that you like and that I'm happy with. Hopefully, this next episode is a lot better tone-wise. If it isn't, please let us know. Again, we always appreciate your comments, and thanks so much. Since the early days of Nintendo Power and Electronic Gaming Monthly, reviews have had a close tie to gamers everywhere. But if we're honest, there are some major problems with game reviews. Now, before you go saying, who's this guy telling me what's wrong with reviews? First of all, why are you watching the show in the first place?
Wait a minute. Why are you here?
But second, I have a little bit of experience. A couple years ago, I started Killscreen, a video game arts and culture site. It's pretty cool. Check it out sometime. And I say yes, game reviews have some trouble spots. Journalistic ethics haven't always been so squeaky clean. Publishers often try to persuade reviewers into positive coverage by offering them access, free games, and sometimes free food. Taco Bell, if you're watching. Then there's Metacritic, where bad scores can actually hurt studios. Employees at Obsidian didn't receive a pay bonus for Fallout New Vegas because the game received an 84 instead of an 85. So close. That's not the critics' fault per se, but it is a sad externality. Game reviews sometimes seem like they're more trouble than they're worth. But then someone at Valve had an excellent idea. With the recent introduction of Steam user reviews, players can express an opinion about a game themselves. It's a good thought. Why labor through dozens of game reviews? We could just read a crowdsourced TLDR version of it on the internet. But hold on, what's actually the root of the problem here? What's really wrong with game reviews? Let's diagnose the top 5 problems and maybe it'll help us find a solution. Problem 1. No two players' experiences are exactly the same. In film criticism, everyone watches the same movie.
I'm not letting you say that kind of crap on my show.
But with games, your personal experience can differ greatly. It's literally impossible to pass judgment on every single way a game could be played. Author Chuck Klosterman once said that unlike architecture, games are not fixed in one place. What makes video game criticism complex, he said, is that the action is almost never static. Every player invents their own future. So you'll have an entirely different experience in The Walking Dead if you don't say anything at all, as the experience of Mute Lee has shown us.
Please try to get in there, behind the counter where the pills are.
Or in EVE Online, one person can be happily mining minerals by themselves, while another person is engaged in all-out war. Problem 2. Our skill often dictates how much we enjoy a particular game. Even if you're a whiz at expertly commanding mecha in StarCraft, you're probably gonna get owned the first time you play Titanfall. As New Yorker author Nicholson Baker wrote about his first foray into games, the first thing you learn about video games is how hard they are to play. Like anyone, a reviewer can struggle at playing a game. How could that not affect their opinion? IGN, for example, gave God Hand a 3, while connoisseurs of the genre consider it one of the best.
The planet seems to be populated by who don't understand why God Hand is one of the best games ever made.
Problem 3. Games are often reviewed the same way as things like cars and electronics. Most sites have gotten rid of straight checklists that give scores to things like music, gameplay, and story, but you still frequently read about things like texture, video quality, and playtime. They review games as products, not as experiences, which is what they really are. Imagine if we reviewed film that way. 12 Years a Slave had a 69 aspect ratio, fairly high video fidelity, and I had a comfortable chair. I'll give it an 8.6. Georgia Tech game professor Ian Bogo says that games have cross purposes. They're software, but they're not like Microsoft Excel. So when a game critic rates a game on its technical merits alone, Bogo says it eliminates the possibility that the game could open up new ways of understanding the world. A minute perspective blinds us to the bigger picture. Problem 4. Games are often unfinished experiences. This is a relatively new one. As some games become like living, breathing ecosystems, reviewers can never finish them. Games like World of Warcraft and Elder Scrolls Online are so massive and so social that they pose problems to game critics. Minecraft is obviously super important, but you never really read a good review of it because it's constantly updating. Your review becomes obsolete the moment that a new update is released.
Dynamic lighting was put in, a new sound engine, and more importantly, crafting was introduced.
The same goes for games like Rust, Kerbal Space Program, and Dwarf Fortress. So when do you review them? When they're in alpha, or like 10 years from now when they're almost complete? Or never. And finally, problem 5. Review by HiveMind doesn't reflect a personal voice. As I mentioned earlier, Steam introduced user reviews to bypass that pesky game critic once and for all. But this approach isn't so hot. The problem is that mass opinion doesn't hold a particular game to the proverbial critical fire, if you will. Since everyone has different experiences, which is understandable, you as a player and as a consumer end up trying to discern the will of thousands of different people. This kind of aggregate reviewing works really well if you want to buy like a vacuum cleaner on Amazon. But is this really the way we want to think about games? At least with a single game reviewer, you know who you can trust, or terrorize on Twitter, depending on your point of view. Blaming a group somehow isn't quite as satisfying. Now some of you are saying, who cares? Let the critics starve. First, that's hurtful and uncalled for. But seriously, we need the input of game reviewers because good criticism helps develop games as a rich and flourishing medium. But games are radically different from books or film or television. So maybe we need a different approach. Here's my suggestion. Game reviews should be about describing an experience, not presenting an end-all, be-all assessment. It's an exploration of a place through words. In that way, it's more like food criticism or travel writing. As the food critic Adam Platt once told me, food reviewing is an amalgam of the subjective, a record of one person's finite experience. So when you read a food review, at least implicitly, you know that it's a review of that one dish that one person had that one time. And you also know that if you go to the exact same restaurant, the dish you get isn't going to be exactly the same. The garnish will be in a slightly different spot. If you think about game reviews like food reviews, then critics can still write about games and provide important critical insight. That keeps the medium healthy and responsible. If we return to the words of Chuck Klosterman, without game critics to think about games as something that are human and metaphorical and contextual, games will just become commodities. Then they'll all become boring. They'll just be games. So what do you think? Is there a place in our contemporary lives for game reviews? Hash it out in the comments, and if you like what you saw, please subscribe. I will see you all next week. Last week, we talked about cheating in games, and maybe it's not quite as bad as one might think. Let's see what you had to say. Victor versus Ken kept forgetting that I was talking about games and not about the realm of philosophy. First of all, that probably says a lot more about you than maybe you'd like to admit. And second of all, I am unfamiliar with this world of philosophy that advocates cheating. But please let me know in the comments where it exists. I'd love to take a look. Apostate It's Ape says that I was actually talking about min-maxing and not about cheating. This actually echoes a comment from a bunch of you, specifically that you thought that I was talking about exploits and not about cheating. I think it's super important to remember that cheating and exploits, they exist on a continuum. Specifically that cheating is a cultural construct, right? So whether or not somebody's cheating may not be necessarily whether or not they're breaking into the game or using an aimbot or using some kind of external force to change the code of the game. It could just be the cultural conditions that you think that somebody is cheating, like the slam dunk. So yeah, so if you think about cheating and exploits as being part of this larger conversation about fair play in games, then that opens up things quite a bit. Epic Forever was wrestling with this big question of what is cheating anyway, and specifically about where hacking plays into it. And some of you wanted me to talk a little bit more about hacking. One of the things I did mention in the episode is that if it fundamentally breaks the game for other people, then that probably falls outside the realm of cheating and more into the role of like griefing or trolling. It's really interesting. Nobody mentioned this in the comments because it just happened, but you'll notice that the Titanfall developers at Respawn have instituted a new policy wherein if you're using an aimbot or cheating inside the rules of the game, they'll put you into a special camp. They're calling it a Wimbledon of cheaters, where you can only play against other cheaters, which is amazing. So yeah, I think that line of like whether or not you're like literally opening up the code and changing the experience for other people, that's probably a bridge too far. But yeah, again, it does make for some really, really complicated discussions. Sean Grogan points us to the world of NCAA football. For those of you who don't know, one of the biggest challenges or the biggest conversations in NCAA football, college football, is about the speed of the game. Specifically that the offense is able to execute a lot more plays than the defense is able to react to. About a year ago, I had a great conversation with the head of the NCAA Rules Committee, and one of the things that he told me, which I never thought about football, was that the fundamental difference between football and other sports is that in football, the offense knows what the play is going to be. So the rules are designed in this sense to prevent strategic collapse, by basically giving more advantages to the defense. There's all sorts of things that a defense can do. Well, how does this deal with cheating? Well, it's really, really important if you want a well-balanced game that you do have sort of cheaters who are pushing the edges of that, and then the rules committee steps in. It's great to see sort of these conversations that we have with games, specifically with cheating, do have applications in the outside world. Grant Anderson makes the astute point that a lot of the code is law camp has to do with developer involvement. So in cases where developers are actively involved and are able to deal with what they think is cheating, they can tweak the game. This is a really big development, particularly in the world of games and with online games, which allows developers the ability to sort of change things on the fly. In the past, you used to just ship a game and then that was it. So yeah, it does really suck for players when developers walk away and aren't able to tune things, but it does present the opportunity for players to establish their own code of conduct to sort of manage whether or not somebody is cheating. But yeah, it totally can lead to some gray area. Antisocial Canine points us to Mike over at Idea Channel's video on trolling and his defense of trolling, which then became not a defense of trolling. It's a great video. You should absolutely check it out. We'll link to it in the comments. I do think one important distinction is that, well, the world of games is fundamentally different than the outside world. So there is a difference between, say, trolling someone over Twitter whose opinion that you don't like, and trolling someone inside a game where the consequences of it maybe aren't quite so dire. I'm not talking about like specifically cursing somebody out or pouring Coke on their keyboard so they can't play anymore. But I do think the motivations of trolls versus cheaters is kind of important. As I mentioned in the video, griefers, trolls, people who want to just take the ball and walk away are fundamentally different from cheaters who want to just push at the boundaries. They really, at the end of the day, really want open competition. So, but yeah, go watch Mike's video. It's totally great. Two quick things before we go. First of all, next week we're going to be releasing a mini episode. We're going to go on a little break, which everybody needs from time to time. And then in 2 weeks, we'll release a brand new episode. The second thing is that we're going to be at PAX East in Boston. So if you want to come and argue with me in person, ask me about the lenses in my glasses, which do exist, I promise. Please come on out. I'd love to meet you and shake your hand. Hey there, newcomers. First of all, welcome. Second of all, as many of you have noticed, I wear glasses without any lenses in them. And the reason why is because I wear the exact same frames, but with lenses, but there's lots of glare, so that's super distracting. So when we're filming, voila, no glare, no lenses. So I'm not one of those people who just like wears glasses without any lenses in them to be cool or something like that. That'd be pretty dumb. So no need to say anything about it in the comments, hopefully. Anyway, thanks for watching.